guys, hope you're well, hope you're good. It's your brother Nascon here from UCTV Blackburn. Hope you guys had a great weekend and having a great week. Today I brought you another special guest in the hot seat, and this time is Hawaii Fivo. Who is Hawaii Fivo? He was recently featured in the Channel 4 series Banged Up, with a lot of other celebrities too. But without further ado, I'm going to get straight into it. Hawaii Fivo, where did you get the name from?
Direct and straight to the point. I like it. So basically, I get called Hawaii Fivo from, it was an old nickname when I was in school. There's a thing in Glasgow, right, where it's almost common courtesy to give someone a nickname, whether that be a derogatory nickname or something complimentary, depending on the certain person in question's reputation. So I was roughly about the age of 14. And I was in school, and what we call in Glasgow, we call a scheme is like a housing estate. So if you're from a scheme, we would usually associate that to the gang that hangs about that housing estate. So if you're from a scheme, you're from a gang as such. So I was winding this lassie up, this girl. It was in the year above me, and me and my friend, we were telling her that I hung about every scheme in Glasgow. And she believed me. The next day, she walked by me in the science corridor and she said, "Alright, 50 schemes, who are you fighting for the night?" And so from that, my name was 50 Schemes. I didn't like that name. Somebody called me 50. I wouldn't answer them. I would ignore them. My real name's Jordan. Until somebody called me Jordan, they wouldn't even get an acknowledgement that they had spoken. So as time progressed, I got a report card back in, I think it was second or third year, and they had marked down that I had been late 50 times. So that obviously added on to the legend of the nickname. Then a story resurfaced from when I was in primary 7, and I was in the dinner queue, and it was a female that was there. It's always females these things seem to happen with. I think there's a pattern here. So I was showing her, look, I can do a magic trick. So I had a 50 pence piece, and what I was going to do is I was going to throw the 50 pence piece under my tongue and catch it, and then throw my tongue over it, and as fast a motion that it would look like I've made it disappear. But I wasn't as fluid in my motion as I thought I was going to be. So when I flung the 50 pence into my mouth, it landed on my tongue, but I was already a few moves ahead. So I lifted my tongue as the 50 pence landed my tongue, and I've ended up swallowing the 50 pence. I say swallow, I choked on it. I was choking. The head teacher, she had to run over and start smacking my back. And I spewed and all over her feet, and the 50 pence piece resurfaced. So that story kind of resurfaced when the kind of 50 moniker had been labelled to myself. So from then on, it was immortalised. My nickname was 50. It took me a few years to come to terms with this. I thought it wasn't the greatest of nicknames. So eventually I just relented, I accepted, right, my nickname's 50. So as time progressed, a few years ago, I started posting videos on social media, playing the guitar, doing parodies as such, and I had to make like a Facebook page. So I didn't like the performing name of 50. Because see the thing being called with a nickname like 50, everybody, all the crap jokes you hear is, "Oh, you 50 Cent," or some kind of connection to 50 Cent. So I was kind of trying to put my own identity on it. So 5-0, people called me 5-0, right? Which some people might think that's quite a derogatory nickname because association with the police. But I just felt that 5-0 sounded a lot more like a name than 50. So I used 5-0, and I wrote it in a way like F-I-V-O. So it looked like a kind of performing name where if you were to read it, you wouldn't realise the origin of it. So it was 5-0 from then on in. And on Instagram, I eventually started posting my videos on Instagram. And Instagram, I needed a username, but 5-0 was taken, obviously. But so I was like, right, what 5-0? what could I use 5-0 this, 5-0 that, and I kind of racked my brain, and I got a light bulb moment. I call it a light bulb moment, some people might call it something else, but Hawaii Fivo, because when I was in prison, and I'll talk about that, I was in prison and I worked in the gymnasium, and one of the PTIs, so that's the physical training instructor, that's basically like an officer in the gym. They used to call me Hawaii Fivo, and I felt Hawaii, it's a bit more exotic. I kind of liked that a bit better, so Hawaii Fivo became, and Hawaii Fivo will hopefully remain.
Cool, good stuff, man, good stuff. Now, tell us a bit about yourself, man. Tell us a bit about your background. I know you were inside for a bit. What were you in for? And how did that happen? And how was it?
So basically, I come from a working class background. My mum and dad, they split up when I was really young, so I grew up with my mother and my sister. My mother, she's a single mother, working a low paying job, struggling to put food on the table, which wasn't her fault. She had a lot of bills to pay. It was just, she was going through a really tough time in her life. So when I was younger, food was quite scarce in the house, but don't get me wrong, every Christmas I had everything I ever asked for. She always managed to make Christmas work, and I commend her for that, because I live alone, I don't have any children. I've got a lot of bills, but I don't have any mouths to feed, and I struggle to kind of make ends meet. So I take my hat off to her for that. We moved to an area in Glasgow, in Cardonald. It was called the Moss Heights. It was a set of high-rise flats in Glasgow. Glasgow is infamous for its high-rises. Back then, this might have been early 2000s, that's when the gang problem was at its highest, round about that time. So my mum, she was really protective, because I was the youngest in the family. So she didn't want me going outside to hang about, because she knew that if I went outside and hung about with the local kids on the estate, that I would eventually start hanging about the gangs. So she kind of forbade me from leaving the house at an early age. So I spent a lot of time on my own. My mum was night shift. My sister, she was much older, so she could kind of come and go as she pleased. So I used to just play the computer, played the PlayStation and that. And from a young age, I started reading. I used to read a lot. I used to read full books in one day. Just, I've got that kind of focused mindset where I get obsessive about something. So if I've got a slight interest in something, it's like the world ceases to exist. So life was pretty normal. I went to school, primary school. I was one of the top in my class. I was dead clever. As I say, I had this obsessive mindset. So when I would go into class, I would aim to be the first one finished their work. I would always have the homework done first. I wanted the top marks. If someone finished their work before me, which was a very rare occasion, but if they did, I'd get annoyed. I did competitive, but I suppose that's healthy competition. So all through primary, some people might have classed me as a geek. That's probably the terminology they maybe used back then. Nowadays, they're a lot less forgiving for that kind of language. But, pardon me, when I went into secondary school, that's when things really changed. Anybody will probably agree that when you leave primary school and you go into secondary school, there's like a level of innocence is almost lost. In primary, you're a child. Secondary, things get a bit more serious. You're doing exams. Everything matters in secondary. Primary didn't really matter. That's kind of what's drilled into your head. Like, you've got exams. This is where your future relies on what you do here. People, you're going through puberty, so you're maturing. You're meeting a larger group of people than you're accustomed to. So suddenly, that's where, for a lot of people, that opinion of what other people think is truly born, is in secondary school. And for me, I'm 6'3" right now, 6'3". I'm very tall. Back in primary, well, secondary, I was quite tall. I might have been about just under 6 foot. I've always stood out. So that made me a target for a lot of people. A lot of people just picking on me, just calling me names and that kind of stuff. And as I say, I was this kind of innocent, hard-working child in primary school. I wasn't hardened by the street. At this point, I hadn't really had much experience of going out and hanging about the streets. So it was a kind of alien environment to me. So I found it quite tough initially. Then, as I say, I had that kind of drive, that determination to be the best performing in the class. So for that also kind of made me a target in secondary school. Whereas in primary, it was a much smaller group of people, as I say. So there was that. So I started kind of acting out after a while, where I just stopped putting in the effort with my work. I stopped behaving and started misbehaving. And when I look back in retrospect, that kind of stems from that feeling of wanting to be accepted, is why I done that. Because I feel in my head at the time, I realised, right, these teachers don't know what they're talking about. This is what I thought. A maths teacher is just qualified in teaching maths, whereas I held these people on a pedestal beforehand. So at this point, I started acting out. I became a class clown, some people might call it. So my grades, they dipped. My behaviour in class, the teachers started to get frustrated with me because I was winding them up. But I started to get socially accepted, which was my kind of goal. So don't get me wrong, I enjoy being funny. And maybe that's where my comedy kind of style, or that kind of came from early on, was from that feeling of being accepted. And I'm sure that's where all comedy kind of stems from, is to be accepted. So as I went through school, as I say, I was misbehaving, but I was still clever. Like, I remember I had an English teacher, Mrs. Hartness her name was. She was an older woman, dead middle class, very stuck up, and she didn't like me. And back then it was standard grades, so you would get a 1-2 score would be a credit. That's like the highest level you can get. Then the kind of intermediate level would be general. That's a 3 and a 4. And the lowest level you can get is a foundation, which would be a 5 and a 6. And a 7 would be a fail. So when I went to do my exams, she predicted me to score a 5, a foundation, on my English exam. And I scored a 2. So I remember going back into the class and kind of rubbing it in her face. And she did. She went like that, like, "You're quite clever, you just don't apply yourself, you just don't behave." So I got a credit mark and I still got thrown out of class. That just kind of shows you the kind of way I acted. So eventually I left school. And at that point I turned 16, so I started hanging about the streets. Now, I started hanging about the streets a few years before that, but my mum was still very in control. Like, you need to be home at a certain time. I got stabbed when I was 14. You would call it one of the olders, because I'd hung about a rival scheme before that. So I'd stabbed 3 times. It was like in the shoulder and in the armpit. It was for nothing. And at that point I was still quite timid. I wasn't violent, I wasn't aggressive. So people would call that in Scotland a liberty. So it's just taking advantage of someone, or bullying. So I think the stuff my mum tried to protect me from, or worst fears, were coming to life. And that is just the reality of when you're hanging about the streets. These are just the things that go down. And as I say, I was always a target because I stood out. I always looked older. So I think to the older people, I looked more in line with them. So I wasn't seen as a wee guy or a young guy. But so eventually, when I turned about 16, I started hanging about the streets, started carrying knives. And I've never had any intention of me using a knife. It was more of an acceptance thing. He's got a knife, I've got a knife, and people they'd give you a certain level of respect. And that's not to say you had any intentions of using it. A lot of people would probably know you weren't going to use it, or you had no plans to use it, but you had it. It was that kind of thing, that equaliser, some people call it. So as time went on, I was getting involved in gang fights. I was first arrested for a knife. I went to a gang fight, and it was the night before I was meant to go on holiday with my family to the Dominican Republic. And so I had went up and tied like a tracksuit top around my head, so it was like a balaclava. Obviously the kids nowadays just don't bother with the creativity, they just wear balaclavas. So I went up and for this gang fight, and I had a kitchen knife on me. And it was just, when we were all going up to the rival scheme, wall grab and stuff, I just grabbed it, so I had it. It was just to show the people that I was with that I had a knife, that I was up for it. To kind of show people as well, you're with, if whatever hits the fan, you're ready. So we went up to the gang fight, and it was just cat and mouse, chasing them, they're chasing us. We were only young, so it was nothing really serious. A couple of stones getting flung, and someone must have phoned the police, because all of a sudden the police came around the corner, and I was stranded at the top of this hill, the top of the hill, and the police had came round the corner down at the bottom. I just remember seeing one of the officers in the car, and they pointed like right at me, because as I say, I was very tall and my face was covered. I was a target. So they've gunned for me, drove up the hill, and I've took the knife out and flung it at a hedge, and it's bounced off the hedge and hit the floor. I've ran towards the police. My thinking was, if they're coming towards me, I'm going to run by them. I didn't take into account the fact that they had 4 wheels and I had 2 legs. So I ran round the corner. One's jumped out and chased me, and the car's done a U-turn. In Scotland we call it done a bully. Came round the corner, caught me, arrested me, put me in the back of the car, and one of the officers, they said they'd seen me fling something away, so they obviously went to retrieve whatever had been thrown away, and they found a lockback someone else had thrown away, so they assumed that's what I had thrown away. So I get taken to court for that, missed the holiday, and I get put in a 77 curfew as part of the bail conditions. And back at that point, I had a victim complex where I blamed everyone else for my problems, because I felt that way as if I'd been a target all my life. I'd always been singled out. It was all about me. So because the knife that had been retrieved was a lockback knife that someone else had thrown away, and not the kitchen knife that I had thrown away, that I was innocent of the crime. That was my thinking. So I felt hard done by. So I thought, well, if I'm innocent, why would I stick to a curfew? So that weekend, I stayed out, didn't go home for the curfew, and I was arrested. I got given a £200 fine for breach of bail, and I didn't learn my lesson after that. I breached my bail again a few weekends later, and I was remanded in custody. That was my first experience of prison. So when I went that time, it was Pullman Young Offenders Institution, and that's where I had my first taste of it. And I had always heard of Pullman, because in England you've got a lot of prisons. In Scotland, you've not got that many in comparison. You've only really got one Young Offenders Institution, so when you're between the ages of 16 to 21, that's where you would go, no matter where in Scotland you are. So when I was growing up, there was that kind of, right, I'm going to jail. Actually, it's real. It's real, because I'd watched documentaries about Pullman, I've heard about it, spoken to people that had been there. So this was my first real taste of it. So there was always almost an element of excitement. Not excitement that I was happy to go to jail, but kind of like, what's inside Pandora's box? That kind of feeling. So I got there. I get shacked up, I get celled up with a guy, Sean Cregan, a boy from Royston. He was my age. He was in for the same thing as me. So it was lucky in that respect. He managed to show me kind of the ropes. And I was next door to a friend of mine who was also on remand at the same time. So the remand flat was called Iona 1. So it's, if anyone that's been in prisons watching this will know what a remand flat, a remand hall is like in prison. It is chaotic, because you've got people coming in off the streets. Sometimes they've got drugs with them, or they're full of drugs, or people are coming in doing 12-month remands. Some people are in doing 2-week remands. It's unbalanced, and it's madness. So when I came in, it was all people between ages of 16 to 21, so it was all quite immature, people winding people up, not really caring, not really taking the seriousness of the matter, because some people, as you say, are in for serious things, some are in for petty things, so everybody's just mixed together. So I found it quite hilarious. I thought it was just funny, because I knew I was only in 17 days. I was remanded until my trial date. So the way I seen it, I was getting out at trial because I never done this crime. So I didn't worry too much, that I knew I was getting out. So I didn't really think too much about it. So I enjoyed it as such. But I get out, and then eventually I get a community service and that. Never done a day of it. Then I get out, and once I get released, not long after that, I was carrying knives again. It was just fell right back into that pattern. And a few months later, during this time I'd been kind of seeing this girl, and it was just really toxic. It was just horrible. It was just a lot of manipulation, a lot of emotional blackmail, and me being young, thought I was in love, just kept going back, and eventually it came to a head. I was at a party one night. This was like the January. This is a few months later. January 2010, pardon me. And I was at a party. I was with a couple of my friends, and one of my friends was in a relationship with the sister of the girl I was seeing. So the girl I was seeing messaged me that night, and we'd been kind of arguing before this. And she says, look, I'm at this house party with my pal, her friend, and her friend's brother had came back to the party that I was at, and he'd told her that I was firing in, basically flirting with her sister. So I was like, not a chance, this never happened, it didn't happen. This is my friend's girlfriend. So naturally, I was quite annoyed. I'd been drinking and I'd been taking drugs. So I had a knife on me and I snapped into some kind of mode. I was like, right. And the fact I'd been arguing with her and I felt she'd wound me up to a certain point. So I was a powder keg waiting to explode. So we got a taxi back to her sister's house, and her sister just stayed round the corner from the house she was in. So I went back round, walked down to the house she was in, because this guy was here. And I was banging the door. A friend came to the door and answered, and I was shouting, get him out here. And he's eventually appeared behind her, and we've been arguing. And eventually he's came out the door and punched me in the face. And I've just grabbed him and I had this knife in my hand. I don't think he's seen it. And I just started stabbing him. At the time, I didn't feel like I was stabbing him, because when I've been stabbed, anybody that's been stabbed before, it just feels like you're getting punched. That's also similar to how it feels to stab someone as well. It feels like you're just punching them. Maybe that's because I was drunk, but as I was stabbing him, he was punching me. So it was like, as if it's like any kind of fist fight you see when two people are hitting each other, you're just hitting as you're getting hit. It was kind of, I wasn't really able to take it in that I was actually stabbing him. So I stabbed him numerous times. And whilst in mid-swing, he's collapsed. And as he's collapsed, the knife, in the motion of it swinging, has caught him in the face and dragged right down his cheek. And I felt it. I remember the blade kind of, see it almost like a chalk, dragging some chalk on a chalkboard. That was the sensation. It was the blade running along his teeth. He collapsed to the ground, and his mother jumped in front of me and she said, that's enough. And at that point I kind of stepped back. That way I'd been getting punched beforehand, so that way I'd kind of had a moment of clarity. And the friend that had answered the door initially, she came up to me and she says, did you just stab him? And I looked at my hands. I remember looking down and I had the knife in my hand. My hands were covered in blood. And she just started crying. And then that's when I kind of realised, right, I need to get out of here. So I've ran round the corner, I've flung the knife in a garden, and I've just went back up to her sister's house where there was a party in place, washed my hands, and just started to drink, continued drinking. She's, the girl I was seeing at the time, she's phoned me and said, why did you do that? What was that all about? And I told her, she said I was flirting with your sister. That was my mindset at the time. I felt he deserved it. And what she said was, oh, he was only having a joke. I knew that. So the guy had said something to her as an offhand joke, and she knew that, and she'd kind of stirred it to a point where it seemed as if he was being serious, just trying to mix something. Although I did go down and stab the guy, I'm not trying to blame anyone, but that's just how that situation went down. So if I fast forward a bit, I was arrested a few days later. Then a couple of months down the line, I was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. So the day after my 18th birthday, I got that sentence. So in Scotland back then, the sentencing guidelines were if you'd been sentenced to 4 years or more, you would serve 2/3 of that sentence. So I was sentenced to 4.5 years. That meant I would serve 3 years. So I had it backdated to January 2010. So my release date was, I had another couple of 100 days added on for something else. So it worked out, I was to be released in March 2013. So when I got that, I kind of immediately just went, right, I'm here for the long haul. back when I came into Pullman this time, it was a lot more serious. I was aware that I was going to be calling this place home for the foreseeable future. And when you need to kind of resign yourself to that fate, it's not got that same element of humour like it did last time. I was back, as much as I say I had a laugh last time, this time I still didn't want to go back. But once I went back, I was kind of right, I'm kind of stuck here. So I just got on with it. I got myself into the gym. That was the thing I seen it as well. Look, I was like that. I'm in here for a few years. I want to have something to show for it. I went to the gym not long after I'd been stabbed when I was young. So I'd kind of been in the gym and been working out, but it wasn't anything really serious. It was on and off. Bad experience of it. So I just really knuckled down and got that obsessive mindset that I talk about. Got that with the gym, and I just went, I want to be massive when I get out of here. Pullman, I was in a couple of fights when I first went in the remand hall. So when I went back for the second time, Pullman had built an under-18s hall. So if you were under 18, whether you were remanded or doing a sentence, you were in this hall. And that was just madness, because it was all really young guys, like 16 to 18, in prison, full of testosterone, full of madness. It was just crazy. There was fights every day. I ended up in a couple of fights. Once I got my sentence, I get moved up to the LTP hall, so that's the long-term prisoners hall. So this is where the guys were a bit older. They were serving longer sentence. You had to be serving like a minimum of 4 years to go up here. So people were in here for the long haul, so you had people from 4 years to life. So I went up there, and that's just kind of when I settled in. I had a few jobs. I worked in the barbers, worked in the plumbers. I kind of just went through my sentence, and it was just, the gym was a massive, massive thing for me. If I didn't have the gym, don't know what I would have done. Tried drugs. I smoked a bit of hash once, maybe twice at the start of my sentence. I just thought, nah, that's not for me. I want to work out, I want to get big. So back then, drugs wasn't a massive problem in prison the way it is now. Whereas back then, drugs would come in every now and again. You would get a parcel or a launch. There would be drugs in the hall for about a week, 2 weeks, until they either get caught or ran out, then it would be dry again. Whereas now it's usually, it's quite common that they're everywhere. So there wasn't really much temptation in the ways of drugs, but as I say, I had the gym, so I just focused on that. And there was some moments in that in prison that there was good moments, there was bad moments. I eventually progressed to what's called a top end hall. So a top end is kind of more like an open estate, where you go into top end, you can start to get like home visits, where you go out to the house unhandcuffed. You can get an outside work party, an outside work placement, where you get a job outside the jail. You go outside to it and come back to prison. Then you eventually get home leaves. So that's kind of where I aimed at, because in Scotland, if you got like a long-term sentence, 4 years or more, you got a parole date. So the parole date would be halfway through your sentence. But you had to be behaving, you had to be doing all the stuff to get it. So that was my kind of, right, I want to get out here as early as I can. So I went over to the open estate, and I got a job in the gym. I was working in the gym, and I really enjoyed it, man. I really enjoyed it. I was working out every day. When you're in like the open estate, it's like it was an open hall of the prison, so you were still in Pullman, but you had a card, a pass. You didn't need to be escorted by officers to and from the gym or wherever you needed to go. So there was a lot of freedom, and I settled in there quite well. I eventually progressed to getting home visits, and then I got an outside work placement. I worked at the Falkirk football stadium. So basically it was just kind of like maintenance as such, operations. And that was really good. That lasted a total of 5 weeks. Basically there was allegations that I was acquiring drugs on the outside and bringing them back to prison to sell to fellow inmates. And the officers claimed they had intelligence to support this. They actually came out and searched a couple of lockers when I worked there, and they decided that it would be best just to remove me from the placement and all outside community access. So I get taken off that due to these allegations, and that was in the last 6 months of my sentence. So at that point, I was just kind of like that. 6 months. Let's see, when you're going, you start a sentence and you've got 3 years, you've got 2.5 years, you've got 2 years. See, when you're sitting and there's guys coming in and out, they've got 3 months, they've got 6 months, and you're sitting with years. See, when you get down to 6 months, that's like, you can see the gate, you can see the light. The last 6 months in my sentence, I was giving stuff away that I'd accumulated over the years. PlayStations. And I don't know if this is a thing, right? In English jails, see in Poland especially, people had a thing where they would collect shower gels. And I'm not just meaning any shower gel, like a coloured shower gel. So see if you get a Lynx shower gel, you would get like the orange Lynx, the green Lynx, the yellow Lynx. You get all these colours and you would line them up on a display on your shelf. You would never use them. You would never use them in the shower. You would just get them for display. So that was quite a big thing. So by near the end of my sentence, I had quite a lot of these Lynx collections, and I just started to give stuff away because the way I seen it, I was out soon. I had 6 months left. The world can change in 6 months, but to me, after being in a couple of years, 6 months was I was home free. So that eventually came, and I was released 3 years, 2 months later, 20 years old, and I had just finished a long-term sentence in Poland. So that was my first big sentence, and I would like to say that was enough for me to have learned my lesson, but unfortunately myself and life had other plans.
Well, since you've been out, bro, you've been a reformed man, you've been a bit of a celeb, you've come on Banged Up as well. How did that come about?
Basically, how I ended up on Banged Up was, so I'm on TikTok, right? So I post a lot of content on TikTok, and during my sentence in Poland, I acquired a guitar. This is the guitar right here. So this guitar, in all its glory, near the end of my sentence, I suddenly got an inclination that I wanted to learn to play the guitar. There was a guy from Dundee, Jamie Dolan his name was, and he used to play the guitar, and I used to love it. I got into Oasis and all that kind of stuff during that sentence. Before, I never really listened to that kind of music, but I got into it, and then I suddenly wanted to learn the guitar, and I thought, plenty of free time here. I would like to say the minute I picked up the guitar, I got right into it and learned it. The amount of times I picked up the guitar, put it down, as probably a lot of people do with the guitar, is pick it up and put it down before they actually learn it. But eventually, I think it was the last year of my sentence, the last 6 months it might have been, and I just says to this guy, Jamie, I was like, look mate, I want you to teach me to play the guitar, teach me. And he's kind of like, mate, I've been in this jail with you for about 2 years. Why you want me to teach you now? And I was like, just teach me. So he just went, right, and he kind of gave me the chords to Oasis, Live Forever. And he's like, right, this is how to play it. On you go. I went and learn it. Kind of, because as if he must have felt, right, I've tried to teach you so many times, so there you go and learn it. So as I say, get that obsessive mindset on, went and learned it, then just developed an addiction for it. I just loved it, and it was one of the greatest things. See if anybody's going to prison, or if anybody's in prison watching this now, pick up an instrument, learn something. It's like, see a guitar, see the time that piece of equipment passed was unreal. Time would just fly by. So I learned the guitar, and that's where I found a real love for it, real love for creating music. I was just writing. I just loved it, and I imagined myself as playing the guitar and all these things when I got out. But when I got out, the friends group I was in, they weren't really into that kind of thing, so it started to gather dust in my house. Then eventually I met a friends group who were in a band, and then they encouraged me to start writing my own tunes, and that's when I really got into it. And as I say, I make my own music today. So there's a guy called Billy Bragg. He's a singer-songwriter from England, and he's quite famous. So he donated these guitars, a number of these guitars to, I don't know if it was all the Scottish jails or all the jails in the UK, but he donated a wad of these guitars to the prisons. So I had acquired this guitar in Poland. It was a guy named Byron Cooper who was doing a life sentence, and he just gave me, he says, this is when I was starting to learn the guitar. He's like, just you have it. I said, I've got no use for it. So when I acquired this guitar, I thought, well, when I'm leaving this jail, I've not got a guitar outside, and I'm not going to buy one, so I'm taking this with me. So I stole this out of prison. So on TikTok, there's a feature where if you post a video and someone comments on that video, you can reply back to that comment with a video. So I can't remember the comment as such. I think someone maybe asked me how I learned the guitar, or where did I get my guitar from. It was something about my guitar, and I replied back saying the story I just told there about Billy Bragg donating at the jail and I stole it out of prison, that kind of thing, with a guitar. So I was contacted by a gentleman called Ben. He was a producer at Shine TV. He'd emailed me from my email address that I'd supplied on my TikTok account, and he said he had seen my video talk about being in prison, and he said they were recruiting people for this TV show where they would set up this experiment where it's like being in prison, and there's going to be 26 ex-cons, and there's going to be 6 celebrities, and the cons are going to show the celebrities what it's like to be in prison, and it's to highlight and open up the conversation about jail life. So I seen that and I thought, naturally, this is right up my street. That I was made to do this programme. I'm confident in front of a camera. I'm talented. TV show, sign me up. Geese at jail, send me there. So there was a process, done Zoom calls where I spoke to the producers and that. They paid for me to go down to London. They paid for me, they paid a train for me to go down and back, which was good of them, it was fair enough because they wanted to meet me. So I went down to London, met them, and we banged up. They were explaining, right, it's just like a jail. You're going into jail, we're going to set up cameras, but there's not going to be any cameramen. The cameras are going to be mounted. It's going to be as real as possible. They were being very tight-lipped about the celebrities though. They suggested a Tory MP. They suggested a singer. That was it. They wouldn't tell his name. They wouldn't give any clues whatsoever. So I was kind of... I felt a bit in the dark getting into the process. So what they done was they had a host of Zoom calls in the lead up to the show where they got a group of us on, the cons, the prisoners, and we could all kind of chat amongst each other, and then they would explain the rules of the show kind of thing. So I think it was Aki Eamon was the first face I seen. I was like, right, I've seen him on TikTok. I'd liked some of his videos and that. So when I seen him, I was like, oh right, I see. So naturally, it made sense that if they got me through TikTok, they might have got someone else through TikTok. But when I arrived there, so eventually, the process was very, very quick. They got in touch with me, it could have been April, May, and we were in the prison for the end of June. It was that quick, it was fast. So we went down to Shrewsbury prison, and when I got there, the idea was all the cons, the prisoners would go in for 2 days, and then the celebrities would start to trickle in day by day. So when I got there, we got to meet everybody. And that's when I realised that I met Lewis Clark, I met Shet Sandu. That's when I realised, all right, these are all people that have been on podcasts, they've been on some form of social platform, which was great. Because for some reason, I just had it in my head that it was just going to be all ex-prisoners. And it was ex-prisoners, but I just thought it was like, as if they've just went down to probation services, where a listing said, sign up for this, and it's just been some random people. So that was good. All the guys are doing great things with their lives now. Some of them use their past in a positive manner to help put people off a crime. Some people have just turned their back on their past completely. So we arrived though, in the lead up to being banged up, there was a part of me that was kind of like, am I really going to do this? Am I going back to jail? Because it was 10 days, and to someone that's never been in jail before, 10 days, not really that long. Try it out, see what it's like. See when you've been in jail, 10 days, you know how long 10 days feels. 10 days is boring. People think when you go into prison, they think of the prison movies, where you go into jail, you've got association, you get exercise, you get the gym, you get the jobs, the work, you've got all that, yeah. But in real prison, the large majority of it is sitting in a cell that is the size of a small toilet for hours, days on end, doing nothing. People don't realise that. People don't see that side of it. And when Banged Up did come out and they shown Sid Owen, Ricky from EastEnders, they did manage to capture that essence when he was sitting in the cell and he was bored, stiff, he was lying there. Because that's what jail is. Jail is like someone has pressed pause in your full life. The rest of the world is carrying on without you and you're stuck in limbo. Your life's in pause, but your body is aging. Everybody else outside is aging. People are passing away. People are going on to do great things, and you're just stuck. And you've got no control over that. So once you've experienced that, you kind of know that feeling of hopelessness, where you can't do nothing about it. You can't just press the call button and go, right, I've learned my lesson. Jail's tough. I'm not going to break the law again. And they go, brilliant. Well, glad you've came round. We'll just get your stuff and let you out the now. No, it doesn't work like that. If you're doing a 10-year sentence, regardless if you learn your lesson in the first day or the last day, you're doing that sentence. Regardless. You've no way out of it. So, a lot of the celebrities experienced that. So when we look at 10 days, and some people didn't, we done 10 days, some people done 8 days, like the celebrities done 8 days, 5 days, 6 days. And they did experience that feeling of hopelessness. So when we went on to Banged Up, we went down and on the first day they were explaining to us, all right, this the kind of things, there can't be any violence, no violence. If there's violence, if two guys are fighting, you're off the show and it's recorded, it's on camera, so it'll possibly be passed on to police. If you see two guys and you think they're going to start fighting, just let one of the prison officers know and we can sort it out. And I swear to God, you could have heard a pin drop for a second and then just laughter. Just everybody started laughing. Because these producers, they've got no experience, to my knowledge, of working with prisoners. So we've all got experience of being prisoners, so we're all on a same level as each other. Whereas they've kind of, I think, they wanted to run a TV show, right? But see, when you're plunging people into a prison environment and telling them to live it like it's actual prison, it ceases to become a TV show. And it did that for me. We went in, and within about 2 days, I had reverted back to being in prison. The mindset, I remember when we first met the prison officers. So the night of us all arriving, there was no cameras on. The experiment hadn't started yet. It was to start the next day. And I remember the two prison officers came up and they're like, hi everybody, all that kind of thing. Like, these are the officers, Vicky, and then I can't remember the other guy's name, he left quite quickly. But as soon as I seen them, that uniform, it's just, suddenly my guard was up. It was just like, right, keeping my distance, just not getting too friendly with them. And that was instantly, the minute I seen the uniforms, that was it. So, from then, the first night was kind of a novelty, right, back in jail, because we didn't really know what to expect. I could go into any jail in this country as a prisoner, and I'll have an idea of what the regime will be like. But to go into a prison environment that's actually a TV show, where there's going to be celebrities and cameras, none of us had experienced that before, so we're like, right, this is a TV production running this jail, so how is this going to work? So I went in with the expectation, and I wasn't the only one that thought, right, they're going to have jobs for us, they're going to have activities, they're going to want to get as much footage and content as they possibly can. How wrong I was. How wrong I was. The first 2 days, I never left the cell. Barely. The food was garbage. The food was worse than jail food. Anybody's ever tried jail food, it was worse. Is that possible? Yes. How is it possible? I don't know. So, I wasn't the only person experiencing these feelings. 2 days into it, I remember sitting and I was in the cell alone. I had a co-pilot, a guy named Liam Meredith. Shout out Liam, great guy. He was he get taken to a group, and I never get taken to this group, and I was kind of annoyed. Why am I stuck in this cell? I've not done anything wrong. And I remember getting really anxious and angry, and I was hatching this plot. Right, I need to get out of this cell somehow. I'll get out of this cell, and I'll run up the stairs, and I'll try and get on the roof. And if I get on the roof, I'll start throwing tiles off the roof. I'll cause a nuisance. And then I just, like, something clicked in my head. I was like, I can leave this whenever I want. I'm here of my own free will. And that was quite a scary thing, because quite immediately your brain reverts back into that kind of instinctual survival mode that you developed in jail. Because when you're in prison, you need to develop like coping strategies and techniques in order just to kind of deal with it, because it can be quite a traumatic experience for some people. For me, I had to accept that I was in prison until I was out prison. Like, once you're in jail, you're there. The jail is your world. The outside world ceases to exist. Some people go into jail and their body's in jail, but their minds are outside, whether that may be with family, children, girlfriends. And that's people that really struggle. That's the people that are on the phones 5 times a day, that are constantly stressing out, that makes their sentence really hard. So you just need to eliminate the outside world and forget, because you've got no control over what goes on in the outside world. You've got no association with it. There's nothing you can do that's going to affect the outside world to a degree. So you just need to accept prison is your world for that time you're there. So once you develop these skills, it's like a survival technique. It's a survival instinct. So when you're put in that position, that environment where this survival technique or this instinct helps you survive as such, pardon me, it automatically kicks in, especially when they're trying to make the experiment seem as real as possible, and that was their goal. And it wasn't to make us feel uncomfortable or make it hard for us, because they wanted to make it real for television, which was great. That's what they were there for. So 2 days into it, the production team had to call a big meeting, and they had to get everybody and say, listen, remember why we're here. Calm down. Like, we're here to make TV. And they did accept, listen, we could have maybe been a bit better with some stuff, but people were going crazy. People were kicking doors, screaming, because, as I say, it was reflective of real jail, because we were in the cells, doing nothing, locked up, banged up, but none of us had done anything wrong. So that was the big thing. It's one thing going, I've broke the law, I've been given a sentence. This is the punishment part of that sentence, and I either need to accept it or not accept it. It's very, very hard to accept something like that when you've done nothing to deserve it. But after that meeting, it kind of reset the emotions, it reset the balance, and went, right, we're here to make a TV show. But we needed that. We needed to be reminded. I remember there's a thing called the Stanford experiment, where basically it was this psychology class in America. They done this experiment where they split the class into 2 halves, and they would conduct an experiment very similar to Banged Up, where one half of the class would play prison officers and the other half of the class would play prisoners. And during the course of this experiment, things took a turn for the worst. Prison officers started like abusing their authority. They started bullying the prisoners, and the prisoners started to rebel, doing hunger strikes and that kind of thing. So with the prisoners rebelling, the officers had to get more authoritarian, and it was just this. And it was due to last 2 weeks, and I think 2 days into it, they had to cancel the experiment. And it was because they'd been thrust into that environment, their brains had to adapt to that. So I went in armed with this knowledge of getting into Banged Up, that this could happen. That wasn't enough for me to realise that. There was producers that were wearing prison officers' uniform, right? They weren't acting as prison officers. They were literally just coming out and handing out mics to people. But for the sake and purpose of the camera and to keep in with the reality of the experiment, they wore the prison officer uniform. So one of the producers, Lauren, I'm sure her name was, I had met her when I went down to London to meet Shine TV. So I already knew her. But when she came in wearing the prison uniform, and when I was looking at her, I couldn't see a producer. I just saw a prison officer. And it led to me not approaching her. Like when she walked by, I'd be very suspicious of her. I would just be quite standoffish. In that way, I was just like, right, that's a screw. And I couldn't get my guard down. And I had to say to her, after we had that meeting, I says to her, look, I'm sorry if I was being a bit off with you, but I just couldn't see past the uniform. And it was bewildering to actually experience that. It was the most bizarre feeling ever to occur. It became very, very real. And I've spoken with the prison officers that worked in the programme, some great people, and they said the same. There was times it just got too real. But it never got to a point where it became, there was certain points where it was like, right, this can go either way. They managed to contain it, which of course it made it to TV, so it didn't erupt, but there was a couple of occasions where it could have. So don't get me wrong, it was a good experience in the sense where it was good to do it. Not many people would get to do that. It's a great topic of conversation. Me personally, I've done very well in terms of exposure. I've had numerous newspaper articles. I've went up a few thousand followers across my social media platforms. I got a blue tick on Facebook. I got podcast opportunities like this. But for me, I didn't really get much exposure on the TV show because the producers wanted people to be giving the celebs a hard time and effectively bullying them. For me, that isn't the kind of person that I am in jail. It's not the kind of person that I am in life. And I'm not saying the people that did act like that are like that in real life, but for me, it's not close, it's not true to my nature. So it's not the kind of person I wanted to portray as myself on TV. So I just stayed myself, just helped people out when I could, just got on with it like I was doing a sentence. So I didn't get as much exposure as I'd have liked, but still done alright off the back of it.
So what's next for you, bro? What's the next chapter?
So the next chapter for me, Naz, right now, I'm focusing on my music. So as you can see here, this is my studio. So I do a podcast, Premeditated Pattern, if anyone wants to check it out. But I also make music. So I just started recording in my studio and I've just kind of started focusing more on the kind of production side of things. So right now I'm working on an album. It started off as an EP, an extended playlist, which is like a maximum of 6 songs. Pardon me. Then it became an LP, which is more than 6 songs, but under a certain amount of minutes. Now it's just became an album, so it's grown arms and legs. So right now, that's exactly what I'm doing. I've got that obsessive head on where I can't wait to get some free time so I can work on my music. So I'm just enjoying that right now. I've got my podcast, just been getting guests on. I've not had any guests on lately, but the idea is to get the ball rolling again with that. I've wrote a script for a mockumentary. So my idea is to possibly tie in the album launch with the mockumentary or somehow connect the two of them, because I feel for my music, it doesn't get the best engagement as I would hope, but my comedy stuff does get a lot of engagement. So I'm thinking if I tie the two of them in together, that might work. So right now I'm just still kind of figuring that out, but usually, as I say, I've got a lot of plates I'm spinning at once. So usually I'd be thinking, right, I'm doing this, but what about this? And that as well. And see now, I just focus on the one thing. So right now, it is the music. And just plodding away and just try to get famous, one viral video at a time. So I'm just on my socials, posting content. I started my own production company, Some Boy Productions, where basically I create content for people. I film adverts to promote people's businesses. I help people build their businesses. So as it stands, I work in a student accommodation. A decent job, get a lot of free time. It's a very relaxed atmosphere. I meet a lot of great people from all over the world. But I've realised, I've probably always known, but I'm not the kind of person that was designed to have a boss. Call it what you will, I'm just too much of a free spirit for that stuff. And I just like to have control over my own time. So the next port of call is to go fully independent with Sunboy Productions and just become my own boss. And yeah, time will tell. I'll be the next megastar to come out of Scotland, rich and famous beyond my wildest dreams, the most known man on the planet. But that will all come in due course, but right now I'm just taking one day at a time.
Before we finish, what's your message for the youth?
So my message to the youth are watching right now, anybody out there, man, find a purpose, find a passion, pursue it. Because see, jail, gangs, crime, knives, there's only a few places they're going to land you, and they're all negative. Either an early grave or a long sentence. That's it. It never ends well. Ask anybody. See, if you ask some of the most, we use the word successful here, some people that have made millions from drugs, some people that have ran areas through crime. See, these people that have turned their back on it, they never turn their back on it, or they never get to the end. If they're lucky to get to the end and say, oh, it was worth it, they always wish they never done it. Because see, when you live that kind of life, jail or death is your only outcomes. Like, especially with drugs. You sell drugs, yeah, you might see a lot of money. You also see a lot of losses. You'll have to spend a lot of time looking over your shoulder. And see, with that, one of the hazards of the job is you need to accept a jail sentence. It's no life to live. And when you see people, maybe on Instagram, and drug dealers as such, or people committing crime and they flaunt all the wealth, that's just an Instagram image or a Facebook image. You don't see what's really behind the picture, or the trauma, or the mistrust, or the things that go wrong with it, and all the worry, or the anxiety. A lot of people end up stuck and trapped in these ways of life with no way out. So don't get trapped. Realise your worth. Believe in yourself. Because as unfortunate as it might need to be, from my own experience, sometimes the only person that can believe in yourself is you. It might not mean much coming from me, a guy from Scotland that maybe speaks in a dialect that is almost like an alien language, but if you can understand this, even if we don't know each other, no, I believe in you. And I believe in you because I was you. You've got bags of potential. I might have taken a path of creativity. I consider myself an artist because my interests are quite diverse, but they all come from a arena of creativity. So that's the moniker I like to apply to myself. Maybe creativity isn't your thing, or maybe that doesn't interest you. What does? Meditate on it. Think, sit, close your eyes, find a quiet room, breathe. And see if nothing comes to the surface immediately. Try something. Find something you might be mildly interested in. Because see, if you try something and you don't like it, it's okay to say, right, I've tried it. I'll move on to something else. My life is full of stuff I've tried and not went back to. The thing is, that's what life is about. It's about creating experiences. Right now, we've got the greatest gift of all. We've got the gift of life. There's a world of opportunity out there. You can be anything you want to be. Don't let society, authority, don't let anybody tell you that that's untrue. Because it's only untrue if you believe it. See, if you believe it, and it's as true as you want it to be. It needs to come from within. But that's what they say. The first step you take in any venture is always the hardest. But once you've taken that step, you've gained momentum. Once you've got momentum, you can start running. But take it from me, man. Take it from somebody that's been there. Once you're in prison, there's no opportunity in prison. There's none. And who knows? Some people make mistakes that take them away from this world of opportunity for a long, long time. It's a long time to be trapped. So don't fall into the trap. choose a future you're not going to regret.
Well, thanks, bro. Thank you so much, Hawaii, for giving us your time and giving UCTV your time, and all the viewers out there who are watching. I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It's respecting. It's good to see people like yourself coming out, doing your thing.
Honestly, thanks very much, Naz, for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, my friend. If I can just plug my social medias, if you want to find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's at Hawaii_FIVO. And if you want to find me on TikTok, it's at Hawaii, so FAWAI_HIVO. I lost a few accounts over the years, so I had to get creative with my usernames. If you want to check out my podcast, it is Premeditated Patter on both YouTube and Spotify. If you want to listen to my music, pardon me, it's FIVO, Spotify, or Hawaii Fivo on SoundCloud. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Naz, my friend, and I wish you all the best for the future. Thanks very much, mate.
Until next time, guys, watch this space.